Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is well. My name is Nick Comley, and I work for Plunkett UK. I'm one of the community business advisors. And thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. We're with Locality this morning and my community, and renting your space for the benefit of your community is the subject of this webinar. It's great to see so many of you registered for this. Obviously, a great deal of interest in generating revenue from space that you can rent out and benefit your community at the same time. We're going to be looking at effectively managing those assets and the liabilities. And let's move on this morning. If you could please put your questions for later into the Q&A at the bottom of this screen rather than into the chat, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you very much indeed. So we'll be using the Q&A function rather than the chat. Obviously, just use the chat if you want to ask any other questions or talk to each other, then that would be great. So who is the Locality and what is the Community Ownership Fund Support Programme? Well, my community is made up of 10 leading community support organisations, and that includes Locality, Development Trust Association Wales, DTNI in Northern Ireland, the Development Trust Association in Scotland, Plunkett UK, Cooperatives UK, Shared Assets, Sporting Assets, the Architectural Heritage Fund, and Compass. And there are a number of other webinars that are coming up that may well be of interest to you that Locality are hosting. The first one being why community engagement is key to your success, and that'll be on the 25th of February there. And then the second one is on the 18th of March, renovating and adapting your space to meet community needs. So that may well follow on from this webinar. And as you can see, the link at the bottom, you can book on those free webinars on the My Community website using that link there. And we will be you'll be able to access those slides from the My Community hub later. So you'll be able to download and get those links to be able to book onto the webinars. So just a little bit about Plunkett UK. We are a national charity. We support people in rural areas to set up and run a wide range of businesses that are owned under community ownership model. And we do that to achieve our vision of resilient and thriving and inclusive rural communities. We represent over 800 community-owned businesses, and there are over 500 that are in the process of setting up in our pipeline. So we provide practical community business support, often free at the point of delivery, funded by our generous funders, but we also provide some consultancy services, networking and raising awareness of the model, quite a lot of lobbying and campaigning for the sector, and that includes advocating with government, think tanks and funders. So I'm joined today by my colleague Diane Cameron from Plunkett UK, and we're also joined by Rachel Day from Locality, and indeed Tracy Kenny from Kett's Bookshops. And Kett's Books is one of our case studies for today. It's a small independent community bookshop in Wymondham in Norfolk, run by the community and for community benefits since 2014. And now we're going to move on to specific learning from Kett's Books themselves. We're lucky today to be joined by Tracy Kenny and by Diane Cameron from Plunkett. I'm just going to ask them to turn their cameras on, and then I'll stop sharing my screen and I will hand over to Diane, who's going to ask some questions of Tracy, and then we'll come back afterwards, finish the presentations, and then there'll be your opportunity to ask your questions. So if you could keep putting those into the Q&A at the bottom, that'd be great. So over to you, Diane.
Hello, hi, thanks Nick. Hello everybody, and welcome as well to Tracy. Thanks for joining us, Tracy. It's really good of you to do that. I know you're just back from holiday. We saw a little bit about Kett's and some inside shots from the shop, and it looks like a beautiful bookshop for a start. And you did talk a little bit about what you do in terms of renting space. So I've just got to delve in a little bit more. I know that Kett's Books were successful in the Community Ownership Fund. You were successful in getting a grant as part of a project where you actually wanted to relocate, didn't you? Because you were already open and trading. Did you always have a plan for renting out space to be part of your business plan as part of what you were always intending to do?
So we traded in a tiny little courtyard location that few people knew about, well, our customers, but many people didn't, for 10 years. And then we realized that the business wasn't thriving. We had to move up in the world. And so we had to go big or into managed decline, basically. And this space, the best building in town, I became aware was going to become available. So it was beyond our wildest dreams, because our previous location was about 20 feet long, and this has 20 rooms. So it was a very big step up, and the only way we were going to be able to make it work would be to let some of the rooms out so that others could contribute to utility costs, repairs. But we also felt like it was a great way to make sure that we would be able to deliver the community benefit if the bottom fell out of the book trade, like I said. So it was always part of the plan.
Great. Yeah, I actually didn't realize there were 20 rooms. That's it's a really big building, isn't it?
It
Yeah.
is, yes.
Yeah. And was it kind of easy to think of those rooms and what you would do with them, or did that take you quite a long time to sort of
Oh, we still
get your
have
heads around that?
debates. We still, I mean, we have 3 tenants now. We have a room that we're holding on to on the 2nd floor as a meeting room, and people are hiring it out this morning. And that will become a room for a tenant while other rooms are being made safe and available. But even now, my project manager will say, "Can I let this room out?" And I'll say, "No, that's the only access I have to my office." And the debates go on. When you're presented with something, especially a sprawling space that doesn't have a lot of definition, you do have to think it through carefully. A customer journey, what's that going to feel like to the users, is really important.
Yeah, that does sound like a sort of difficult thing to thread your way through. And so that income stream that you're getting and that you're building up supports the bookshop business, as you've said, that in case the bottom drops out, or even if it doesn't, this is always going to be a good thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
What have you found? We did hear about the 20-12-year-olds that you had in, but what have you found that you've had to consider about doing this, which you weren't maybe aware of before you started? What have you learned about what doesn't work as well, that has surprised you?
So we have always operated on goodwill and trust, and those are absolutely important, and we still do. But actually having things in writing is really important, because what we consider goodwill isn't the same as what someone else considers goodwill. There are a lot of people who will abuse the word community, or being a community bookshop, and they think that means that we have to give them whatever they want because they're part of the community. And that's not how it works. So we've had really clear ideas set out from the beginning about, for instance, what sort of tenants we want, that we want them to be a really good fit with our values. So just to be clear, our spaces are primarily for people to have at least a year at least on, so that they can operate an office out of it. We don't do co-working at the moment. And we've had all kinds of people come out of the woodwork saying that they like to have that kind of space. And, no judgment, but if we are going to have 12-year-olds running around and we're an ethical bookshop, then I usually, to not offend anyone, say if someone cannot buy the product until they are 18, then they're not going to be a good fit.
Yeah.
So we're a bit more specific, actually, about who's going to be a good fit. And sometimes we just have to turn people away and say, no, and we can't go as far as having DBS checks on our tenants, but we do have to be careful, because if we have children's mental health services, if we have young people in the building, then we need to not have high traffic through the building.
Right. So you have to consider, as we saw in the film as well, you have to consider who else is going to be in the building at that time. And it's not just about the activities, it's about how people get to the space that they rented as well.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So we have a separate entrance out the back there's a space like a courtyard, which we have renamed Kett's Yard. And so the front entrance is Kett's Books, and then we have Kett's Yard. We've registered it as a separate address with the post office. It has its own signage. People can say that they're part of this business. I'll say complex, it's not as big as that. Kett's Yard, and so they have their own entrance. But we just have to make sure it's all accessible and secure. We've had loads and loads and loads of debates about locks. I must have sat through about 20 hours of discussions about locking systems. But these are the practicalities you have to work through because of insurance and safety and making sure people can get out of the building in a fire, making sure people can get into who need to. What we've ended up with is a double system where we do have a key fob, but we also have an insurance approved lock, because if someone stops paying the rent, for instance, we can just change the access on their fob immediately. They can't make copies of that key. And so we have some control, and we also know who's in and out at any time.
Yeah, that does sound like you've got a system that is a result of a lot of thinking through there. So I hope that's working for you. That sounds like a good system. And do you, just out of interest, do you also ask for public liability insurance from the groups that are renting space from you?
Yes, we ask for public liability insurance. We ask for them to have all the licenses and memberships of whatever their profession would require. So for instance, we have an architect. I haven't looked at his qualifications, but he's been trading in the town for about 40 years, and he's a very, very well esteemed person. But you know, if you have it in your terms and conditions that you can ask for it, then you can. So we do require all of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good thought actually, about putting something in the terms and conditions that allows you to ask for something if you need to. You might not need to every time, but yeah, that's a good tip. So the benefits that are coming out from space rental for you guys, obviously the income stream, but how has renting the space out made a difference in other ways to you and to the people that are using it?
The best way is the impact on individuals. So we have as a bookshop, we've always relied on volunteers, and we were quite successful at that. But we realized, well, what we didn't realize until we had all of this space is that we had a really committed, interested group of people who didn't want to serve customers, but who wanted to be involved. And every afternoon you can find someone here doing DIY, and they're finding their own friendships. So they're friendly with the bookshop crew, and they're invited to all the same parties and so on. They're greeted by us. We make everyone a cup of tea, but they come in, they're never seen on the front, and they are finding their own friendships, a reason to get out of the house. We were told last week that a lady said that her husband usually just sat at home silent, but now she can't shut him up in the evening after he's been in to do DIY with us. That's just such a transformation. And you know, the DIY is great for us, but how wonderful for them.
Yeah, assuming she wants her husband to talk to her a lot.
That may change, but at the moment she's just pleased that he's engaged.
Yeah, that's great. And in terms of sort of the difference in the wider community, have you had any feedback from surrounding shops or surrounding businesses about, since you've moved into this new premises, has it affected the surrounding businesses as well?
Well, it really has. So we were lucky enough to have a really enthusiastic group of people who wanted to transform the building, and we were able to work with an actual designer to make it really, really jaw-droppingly beautiful. And we did have a month of dropped jaws, literally. And we were told that it had become a destination, that people were bringing their visitors in to see the bookshop, and empty spaces in the town have started filling up. Maybe they would have anyway, but I'm noticing a lot more confidence in smaller businesses taking on really much larger premises. And perhaps that's our influence, perhaps it isn't, but there has people have talked about an increase in footfall in the town since we moved here. It was a big, bold step. We had the 10 years of customer support behind us, so we had their backing, but it was a risk, but we had a plan, and the sublets were very, very much part of that plan.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
I say
really
sublets. Yeah. From when we were letting, they were our sublets, but now they are our tenants. So.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like it's been a really positive thing, not only for you, but for other businesses around you, other spaces, and really for the town as a whole, for that sense of regeneration of a high street almost, which is really great to see. Do you think there's a sort of feeling of, well, it's worked here really well? Maybe we can do it too. I mean, it sounds like that kind of thing is happening if people are looking at larger premises than they might otherwise have been.
Yeah, I absolutely do think that in the town, but also I'm trying to encourage other bookshops to look into this because they have trouble with their landlords or need more space, or they know that they could do more, or that they I was talking to one this week who has space upstairs, but she says her insurance won't let her let the spaces out. So I said, well, change the insurance. But I'm not making that point very well, apparently. I don't know why anyone wouldn't do it, particularly if they are a social enterprise, because by definition, you have the support of a lot of people who want to help you and who want to make it happen. And quite frankly, who want to dream. They want something to work toward. And if it's just doing the same thing that you've always been doing, then that's great and people benefit. But to have something really wonderful to aspire to, which could be funded by the spaces, which would then benefit them and benefit the whole town, why wouldn't you?
Do you think it's been inspiring what you've been doing to other people? It sounds like it has.
It has been inspiring to other people, yes. And I had one of my 17-year-old volunteers yesterday said to me, how did she put it? When she sees that someone is growing from being part of us, it makes her really happy that she's part of making that happen. Even though she's not the one getting the direct benefit, she knows she's helping to deliver that. Everyone here feels like something really special is going on.
Yeah, and it sounds like people who are involved in whatever way they're involved is really proud of what you're doing and of what's going on. Have you started any new things or new initiatives, or have you had any thoughts about doing different and new things that have come out of hosting these activities or come out of what volunteers have been saying to you? You know, if you might be hosting a particular activity and think, actually, we could do this for X, Y, and Z instead, or do things kind of snowball a little bit sometimes like that?
Well, you have to work with what you've got, don't you? And it's really important to understand the demographic that you've got, and not just who you see, but to look at the numbers and to look at the government statistics. I was astonished when I found out, but actually what I found affirmed what we're doing. What I personally aspire to, and we're not there yet, is Sunday openings, because Wyndham is beautiful. And when I come into town on Sundays, I see families here basically wandering through the town and going home because not very much is open. So even if we didn't get a lot of people through, I want to give them a place to come in. I want the shop to be open. We've got all this space. We're paying for it 7 days a week. Why would we not? To give people something to give them the opportunity to discover Kett's books as well.
Yeah. And so what sort of considerations are you having to think about when you're thinking about Sunday opening? What's I guess what's stopping you doing it straight away, or what do you have to sort out in order for it to be possible and practical?
Staffing, but people who will be willing to work on Sunday, basically. I could say that if I'm paying someone to do a back office task, they could do it here, and even if they only see half a dozen customers in the day, they're still getting their office work done. We've only been here 15 months. I mean, open 15 months, so there's still quite a lot that we're settling into. And the shop very much has just picked up and moved to the new space, but the lettings, the spaces that we're letting out are really what's taking a lot of our time now. Just like I said, to continue negotiating about what we're going to be doing with the spaces and how we need to do it, and finishing up some of that paperwork. One of our biggest challenges with the paperwork was when we were letting the building from a landlord, renting it, and then we had our tenants our solicitor gave us enormously complicated paperwork, which wasn't fit to purpose. And so when we've made the paperwork for our tenants, it's been a little bit too loose. So some people push back. And one of my real learnings is I would like to have got all of that sorted before we let anyone in. Because once someone is in, you have an obligation to them. And I want them to be in, and everyone's really happy, but some of the papers still haven't been signed by a few people. And that's frustrating. It's not anything malicious or big debates. It's just they might ask a legitimate question, and it is a legitimate question that we hadn't thought of. So that will become easier.
Yeah. There is a lot to think around, isn't there? I mean, it sounds like you've done fantastically well, and you're still renovating, I think, some of the space. Did you say?
Yeah, so it's a Georgian double bay window Georgian fronted building. We think that is a facade on a much older building. So that's 2 stories with a cellar, and then there is a 2-level extension into the courtyard. At the end of the extension, we want to develop that because at the moment we don't have a ground floor toilet. And so as my population ages, the population and my volunteers age, I don't want to have to ask them to keep going up 7 steps to get to the loo. So we're developing the end of this building. And likewise, when we came in, we thought we would go straight into having mother and toddler groups, but we can't store their pushchairs. And I don't want to ask them to take the babies up 2 flights of stairs. So we've had to put all of that on hold. So we're renovating the end of this space. And anything worth doing is going to be hard work.
Yeah, and you can only do so much at a time as well. So it sounds like sort of phasing what you can see and kind of planning it sort of to follow on from each other rather than trying to do everything at once.
It really is. So the target was get the shop open because we opened on the 30th of September, and that's Christmas season in retail, and we had to get in. Any later would have been a waste. So we got in for the 30th of September, and then we finished off the spaces that our tenants have, and now we're doing that. One thing that has worked well for us is we've been able to keep the same project manager all the way through. He's someone who knows the town and who I've known for years and years, and he's still running his own business, but he's here every Wednesday afternoon. He gets what we're doing with the volunteers, so we pay him, but he's happy to work with volunteers. And so these people, like that man, are finding friendships with him, and I think he's benefiting a bit from it as well.
Yeah, and that's sort of what everybody calls community cohesion, is kind of coming through from what you're saying. People being involved, getting those sort of community benefits that is maybe not why they got involved in the first place, but it's often why they stay, and why they're chatting away in the evening to their spouses apparently as well. Okay, I think we've probably got to the end of our little our slot. So thank you very much for talking to me, Tracy.
Pleasure.
It's been really, really interesting. Good luck with the rest of the renovations and the space rental.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, well done on what a beautiful shop. Looking through the pictures, it looks absolutely lovely. Urge everybody to go and visit if they're ever in Norfolk.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much indeed, Diane, and thank you to Tracy for that really interesting insight into your journey and your experience there. And certainly 4 C's certainly came to mind: cohesion, consistency, clarity, and compatibility. So thank you very much indeed for sharing for that. That's great. So if we just move on to what we can learn from that experience, some basic principles in terms of what activities in those spaces are possible. And the first thing, I think it was we were just hearing from Tracy there, is 20 rooms. You need to survey that space. You really need to understand the space that you have, and whether that's external outdoor space, whether that's land, whether that's forestry, whether that's rooms, whatever those might be, really understanding and surveying the space that you have in terms of what you're currently using it for, what any planned usage might be, how that could be shared, but particularly in terms of its size, its location, the access and egress as well, the height, the width, all of those things. It's really about understanding the space that you have, and in particular, how community benefit could be derived from that. And I think we've heard from all of those organisations that contributed to the film and from Kett's books that it's about creating that sense of community and a hub. That compatibility is really important. So surveying that space and knowing what you can make use of yourselves, what is redundant space effectively that you can hire out, and in particular how I think Tracy alluded to the fact that many people will know each other and invite other people into those spaces, and planning for that is really important and may take some time. Particularly in relation to tenancies. If you have a license to occupy, that may be slightly more flexible in terms of hiring out to new tenants, new hirers rather than actually having tenancies. But similarly, just a simple room hire may allow you to have a wide number of groups coming in, and that space does need to be flexible if you are going to have quite a high turnover of groups in there. So you need to assess the logistics of storage, and I noticed storage and putting a container in the back, it does seem to be one of those things that is fairly universal for many organisations. Is a real lack of storage when it comes to groups wanting to come in. They either have to bring it with them and take it away again, or can they store it on the premises? And it's really important that you think about how that may be stored safely, and from a health and safety perspective, how things can be removed from storage safely and moved around. And in terms of access, how will people get in and out of the building? I think Tracy alluded to the fact that volunteers being asked to walk up 7 steps to be able to get to the toilets may be a barrier for them in terms of their volunteering, but it may also be a barrier to other groups coming in and using your premises. So creating a safe, welcoming environment that is accessible is really important when it comes to utilising your space for rental. Transport, how will people get to your venue? Really important. I mean, it may be that as an organisation you do provide your own transport. It may be that others provide third-party transport to groups, or they may provide their own transport. And really considering how compatible that is with your community purpose is an important consideration. You know, putting in bike racks and allowing for bike service stations and things like that to encourage people to find alternative ways of coming to your building is really important from a sustainability perspective. But in terms of access, it may well be that you do need to provide facilities for mobility vehicles to be able to get in and get people off wheelchairs and into the building. So having sufficient turning circles and access and things like that for transport is important. And parking, again, I think we're alluding to the nuisance of having people coming to your premises to neighbours, and parking can obviously be one of those things, can cause some points of arguments between people, and certainly considering the capacity for parking and alternatives for parking and whether car sharing and things like that would be a way of doing that. And other types of nuisance, as well as the noise that we heard of, and that other tenants and other hirers, but also neighbours, try to consider what might be a way of mitigating some of those nuisances, and essential part of planning for the activities that may be possible in your building. And then some other practical things like checking the loading on floors and ceilings, and making sure that they can sustain the weights. I noticed from the leisure centre, they'd had a weightlifting area. Well, if you're thinking of putting one of those into a bookshop, then potentially you need to do some work on considering how many kilos could the floor sustain in terms of doing that, and the capacity of the rooms. How many people could safely be in the room, and how could you evacuate people if you needed to, in terms of those capacities. So those are some of the considerations that you may want to put in place whilst you're thinking about what activities are possible. So the next thing is who will want to come. And I think we've already alluded to the fact that what's really important is market research, but also marketing and promotions. And it's a really important part of your business planning for that space, is that you've done your market research before committing time and resources and that space. So consulting with potential hirers and users and other groups that may also be affected by their use. Make sure that your market research is robust, making sure that you understand the needs of clients, but also making sure you understand the potential. And this is an area where I think for many community-owned businesses, the trade-off between community benefit and profitability is something that I think they consider. So again, the sports field being available to community groups for free at off-peak times, and then football clubs coming in and paying a premium for peak times is a way of managing that community benefit alongside the need to generate income from that. And market research will help you identify that. So who are we taking business from? Which organizations are the ones that are affected by what we're doing? And these may just simply be unintended negative social impact from our activities, taking hire away from other village halls or other community groups or social clubs may well have a detrimental impact on their own income. And I know that within the film, talking about having a unique selling point of your own building and creating your own environment that you're happy with, that you want clients and customers and users to come into, but bearing in mind that they may be coming from somewhere else. And I think it's really important as a way for community businesses to express that concern for community and measure the social impact that they're having, that they also consider some of the detrimental things as well as the very, very many positive things that they are bringing to that. So that will help you to find out who will want to come. Going out, having conversations within your community and having those discussions, look at existing hirers. I mean, it may well be, and I've come across this on several occasions, that groups only have access to certain leisure centres at certain times that their users would prefer to meet on another evening during the week or twice in a week, and the availability is simply not there, in which case you're adding to capacity rather than detracting from things. But at the same time, do you need to duplicate the same facilities, or can people simply come and bring things with them to be able to do that? So who would be responsible if you do start to rent out space at your community-owned business? Well, you obviously have your own health and safety responsibilities as the owners of the premises, and you'd be expected to do your own risk assessments and have your own management plans for managing those health and safety risks. So whether that's COSH or RIDDOR or first aid or any of those things, then you have a responsibility for that. But at the same time, within your hire agreements, I think we've heard this already, you know, it's important that there's clarity about who has responsibility for some of those things. So, for example, if a third party were bringing people in wheelchairs to your building, who is responsible up until which point? Who's responsible for moving from one vehicle into the building and then around the building and back out again? It's really important that everybody understands where those boundaries are and what instructions they have to follow. And having a management plan is really important. Now, whether or not you insist on having a robust risk assessment presented to you by all of your hirers will depend on the nature of that hire and the activities that are taking place. But it's good principle to at least have made that assessment. And having those mitigations and that management plan in place is essential in case things do go wrong or escalate and need to be dealt with urgently in particular. So having those clearly delineated boundaries and instructions is really important, not only for your own staff and volunteers, but also for visitors coming into the premises and other hirers and their clients as well. So ensure that your hire agreements are clear, they're easy to understand, and they are comprehensive. And I fully take on board Tracy's example there of being presented with an overly onerous document by a solicitor who will want to make sure that they have covered all of those things. But if it makes it impenetrable and very difficult for people to understand, it may cover the legal liability, but it may well not be the best way of presenting that information to people. And in terms of access, is it fair to be giving groups that may have difficulties in understanding the language that is used in a legal document like that to be able to really understand what their responsibilities and their liabilities are? So certainly making sure it's clear, easy to understand, but does cover all the points is really important. And then safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. And I think we've already talked about some of those groups that may ask for a DBS, and clearly dealing with vulnerable adults or children, then it's important that you have gone through a process yourselves in terms of your own volunteers or your own staff, but certainly of ensuring that when people are coming to your premises that you've done some due diligence around the safeguarding, making sure that people are properly assessed as they come into the building, and who is the nominated person that you need to contact, and in an emergency, who would you contact in terms of reporting child safety concerns or prevent concerns or anything like that. And safeguarding in terms of security, I think that was mentioned before as well, is everyone's responsibility. So making sure you've got good policies on things like reporting unattended luggage and dealing with those sort of things, and making sure that everybody can be kept safe. And finally, check with your insurers as to whether the planned activities that you're likely to do are compatible with your own insurance. And I think already in the film, one of the hirers alluded to the fact they like to have public liability insurance. But again, as Kett's Bookshop do, they have professionals who are providing counselling services, and it may be appropriate to have professional indemnity insurance as well, and check that with your practitioners who are coming in to use that, so that if anything were to happen where you did require to talk to your own insurers, that you've done everything that you can to make sure that it's compatible with your own policies and doesn't invalidate it. So what could go wrong? I think essentially what we've heard from all the people in the film and from Kett's Bookshops is that compatibility and that development of relationships is really important, and that helps to build trust. But at the same time, trust is something that we do need to challenge and question to make sure that we don't become complacent around that. So having an up-to-date risk assessment with mitigation plans is essential, and making sure that you regularly update that if risks were to change. It may be seasonal risks, but it may also be that new hirers bring new risks, and you need to reassess at that point. Having emergency contacts and nominated responsible people, they must be clearly identified and contactable. And I think the important thing maybe about Sunday opening is that consideration. Well, is it possible for us to have in place contingency that if there were an emergency on a Sunday would be as responsive as we would if there were more people around in the building? And having that information clearly accessible to people who are hiring the premises or using and accessing the premises is essential. And have clear reporting procedures and communication channels within your own organisation, but also externally. So make sure that you understand what the reporting procedures are for RIDDOR, for example, if there are near misses or anything around that, and how communication channels would work within your organisation. So is it a case of if you've got 20 rooms and 20 different hirers, how would they communicate? Is it possible to have things like a WhatsApp group for users who can share that information? Is it important that you have a regular monthly meeting of key tenants so that you can address any of those issues? But having those available communication channels, not just publishing a telephone number and saying, if there's a problem, give us a call, but being proactive about that is really important in managing those relationships. And check the maintenance of all the equipment and facilities and services that you are providing, but that also you're aware of that people may be bringing into your building. So things like PAT-tested equipment is an example where you're protecting your own building from being overloaded from electrical goods and equipment that is being used. And that will obviously help you be compliant with any sort of safety requirements. So hopefully, there won't be issues that need to be addressed in terms of things that are going wrong. And we can all see some great examples from the video and from Kett's books of where it's encouraging the community to come in and make use of that as a hub